The morning sun cast long shadows across the military base as General Marcus Thompson walked through the rows of tents. His weathered face showed the marks of 30 years of service, each line telling a story of battles fought and lives lost. Today was different, though. Today he was inspecting the newest batch of recruits who had just returned from their first deployment in Afghanistan. The smell of coffee and diesel fuel mixed in the crisp morning air as soldiers moved about their daily routines. General Thompson had seen thousands of young men and women pass through these gates over the years, but something about this particular group caught his attention. They had faced real combat for the first time, and he wanted to personally welcome them home. As he approached the medical tent where soldiers were getting their routine post-deployment checkups, he noticed a young woman sitting on a bench outside. She was maybe 22 years old, with short brown hair tucked under her military cap. Her uniform was clean and pressed, but her hands shook slightly as she held a cup of coffee. "Soldier," the general called out, his voice carrying the authority of decades of command. The young woman immediately stood and saluted. "Sir, Private Sarah Mitchell, sir. At ease, Private. How was your first deployment?" Sarah relaxed slightly but kept her military posture. "Challenging but educational, sir. I learned a lot about myself out there." General Thompson nodded. He had asked this question to countless soldiers, and he could usually tell by their response how they had handled the pressure. Sarah's answer was honest, but not boastful, which he respected. "Where are you from, Private Mitchell?" "Originally from Phoenix, Arizona, sir, but I grew up in various foster homes around the state." The mention of foster care made the general pause. He had his own complicated history with family, something that had driven him to make the military his life. "No family to speak of, then?" "No, sir. Been on my own since I was 18. The Army became my family, sir." Something in her voice reminded him of his own younger self. The determination mixed with loneliness that came from having no one to fall back on. He was about to continue the conversation when the medic called Sarah's name. "Private Mitchell, you're next for your medical check." She saluted the general again. "If you'll excuse me, sir." "Of course. Welcome home, soldier." As Sarah disappeared into the medical tent, General Thompson continued his rounds. But something about the young woman stayed with him. Perhaps it was her composure or the way she carried herself despite admitting to a difficult childhood. He had met many soldiers over the years, but few left such an immediate impression. Inside the medical tent, Sarah sat on the examination table while Doc Peterson, the base medic, checked her blood pressure and asked routine questions about any injuries or illnesses during deployment. She had managed to avoid any serious injuries, though like most soldiers, she had collected a few minor cuts and bruises. "Everything looks good, Mitchell," Doc Peterson said, making notes on his clipboard. "Just need to do a quick check for any new tattoos or markings that need to be documented in your file." Sarah hesitated for a moment. During her deployment, she had gotten a tattoo on her shoulder blade. It was something deeply personal, and she wasn't sure she wanted it in her official military record, but regulations were regulations. "I do have one new tattoo, Doc." "Let's take a look then. Standard procedure." Sarah turned around and lifted the back of her shirt slightly, revealing her right shoulder blade. Doc Peterson looked at the tattoo and immediately stopped writing. His pen hovered over the clipboard as he stared at the intricate design. "Mitchell, where did you get this tattoo done?" "Small shop in Kandahar. One of the local artists there. Why?" "Is there a problem?" Doc Peterson was quiet for a long moment, studying the tattoo more closely. It was a beautiful piece of artwork, a phoenix rising from flames, but underneath the bird were some numbers and a small symbol that made his blood run cold. "Mitchell, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Did you choose this design yourself, or did someone else suggest it?" Sarah turned back around, confused by the sudden serious tone in the medic's voice. "I chose it myself. The phoenix represents rising from difficult circumstances. The numbers underneath are my birth date, and that small symbol—" She paused, touching her shoulder unconsciously. "That was something I remember from when I was very young, before the foster homes. I'm not even sure why I included it. Just felt right." Doc Peterson set down his clipboard and looked directly at Sarah. "What exactly do you remember about that symbol?" "Not much. I have this vague memory of seeing it on a piece of jewelry that belonged to a woman who used to hold me. I assume it was my mother, but I was so young when I went into care that most of my early memories are fuzzy. Why are you asking all these questions?" The medic was quiet for another moment, clearly wrestling with whether to say something. Finally, he made a decision that would change everything. "Mitchell, I need you to wait here. Don't leave this tent. I have to make a phone call." "Doc, what's going on? You're starting to worry me." "Just trust me on this one. Give me 5 minutes." Doc Peterson stepped outside the tent and pulled out his cell phone. He scrolled through his contacts until he found the number he was looking for. General Thompson had given him his personal number years ago for emergencies, but he had never used it. Today felt like an emergency. The phone rang twice before the general answered. "Thompson here." "Sir, this is Doc Peterson. I'm sorry to bother you, but I need you to come to the medical tent immediately. It's about Private Mitchell." "Is she injured? What's the situation?" "Sir, it's not a medical emergency, but I think you need to see something. It's important." General Thompson could hear the urgency in the medic's voice. Doc Peterson was not one to panic or make unnecessary calls. "I'll be right there." The general changed direction and headed back toward the medical tent. His mind raced through possibilities. Had Sarah been hiding an injury? Was there something in her background that raised security concerns? As a general, he had learned to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. When he arrived at the medical tent, Doc Peterson was waiting outside, pacing nervously. "What's this about, Doc?" "Sir, I need to show you something, but first I need to ask you a personal question. You mentioned once that you had a daughter who was taken into state care many years ago. You never told me the details, but you said you've never stopped looking for her." General Thompson's face went pale. His daughter Emma was a topic he rarely discussed, even with his closest friends. The pain of losing her was something he carried every day, but it was also deeply private. "What does this have to do with Private Mitchell?" "Sir, I think you should see her tattoo." The general felt his heart skip a beat. "Her tattoo?" "Just come inside, sir. Let me show you." They entered the medical tent, where Sarah was sitting nervously on the examination table. She stood and saluted when she saw the general. "Private Mitchell," Doc Peterson said gently, "the general needs to see your tattoo. Would you mind showing him?" Sarah looked confused, but nodded. She turned around and lifted her shirt again, revealing the phoenix tattoo on her shoulder blade. General Thompson stepped closer and studied the tattoo. At first he saw what anyone else would see, a beautiful phoenix rising from flames. But as his eyes moved to the numbers and symbol underneath, his breath caught in his throat. The numbers were Sarah's birth date, which he now realized matched exactly with a date burned into his memory. But it was the small symbol that made his knees weak. It was a tiny Celtic knot, intricate and unique. He knew that symbol because he had designed it himself 23 years ago. "Where?" His voice cracked. "Where did you see that symbol before?" Sarah turned back around, still confused by all the attention her tattoo was getting. "I told Doc Peterson, I have a vague memory of seeing it on a piece of jewelry. A necklace, I think. Someone used to wear it when they held me as a baby." General Thompson reached into his shirt and pulled out a chain. Hanging from it was a locket, and on the front of the locket was the exact same Celtic knot symbol. He opened the locket, revealing a tiny photograph of a baby girl. "What was your name before you went into foster care, Private Mitchell?" Sarah stared at the locket, her mind racing. I was told my original name was Emma Thompson, but when I was placed in care, they changed it to Sarah Mitchell. They said it would be easier for potential adoptive families if I had a more common name. The medical tent fell silent, except for the sound of the general's heavy breathing. 23 years of searching, 23 years of wondering if his daughter was alive, and she had been serving under his command for months without either of them knowing. Emma, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Sarah's eyes widened as pieces began falling into place. The symbol, the name, the way this stranger was looking at her with such emotion. I don't understand what's happening here, she said, though part of her was beginning to. General Thompson took a step closer, his eyes filled with tears he had been holding back for over 2 decades. Emma, I never stopped looking for you, not for a single day. The silence in the medical tent stretched for what felt like hours, though only seconds had passed. Sarah stared at the man claiming to be her father, her mind struggling to process the information. She had dreamed of this moment countless times as a child in foster care, but she had long since given up hope that it would ever happen. I think I need to sit down, Sarah said, her legs suddenly feeling unsteady. Doc Peterson quickly brought her a chair while General Thompson continued to stare at the locket in his hand, as if seeing it for the first time in years. The photograph inside showed a chubby-cheeked baby with bright eyes and a tiny smile. I took this picture the day before. He paused, struggling with the words. The day before they took you away. Sarah looked up at him, searching his face for any resemblance to her own features. Now that she was looking for it, she could see similarities in their eye color and the shape of their chin. But more than physical resemblance, there was something in his expression that felt familiar, like a distant memory trying to surface. Tell me what happened, she said quietly. Tell me why I was taken away. General Thompson sat down heavily in another chair, suddenly looking older than his 58 years. Your mother, Rebecca, died when you were 18 months old. Car accident on a rainy night coming home from her job at the hospital. I was deployed overseas at the time, serving my second tour in Iraq. He paused, running his hands through his graying hair. When I got the emergency leave to come home, I found out that social services had already placed you in temporary care. They said I was an unfit guardian because of my military service, that I would be deployed too often to provide stable care for a toddler. Sarah felt her chest tighten. So you just let them take me? No, he said firmly, his voice carrying the same command authority she had heard earlier, but now tinged with pain. I fought them for 2 years, hired lawyers, went to court, did everything I could think of. But every time I was scheduled to get you back, another deployment would come up, or they would find some new reason why my lifestyle wasn't suitable for raising a child. Doc Peterson had quietly stepped to the corner of the tent, giving them space while remaining available if needed. He had never seen the general show this much emotion, and it was clear that this conversation was tearing open old wounds. The final court hearing was in 2003, the general continued. The judge ruled that it was in your best interest to be placed with a stable family rather than continue the uncertainty of military life. By then, you had been moved to 3 different foster homes, and I could see that the constant legal battle was taking a toll on you, even at that young age. Sarah wiped away tears she hadn't realized had started falling. So you gave up? I never gave up, he said, his voice rising slightly before he caught himself and moderated his tone. I signed away my legal rights as your father, but I never stopped looking for you. I hired private investigators. I checked every military recruitment database. I followed every lead. When you aged out of the foster system, the trail went cold. Why didn't you find me when I enlisted? My background check would have shown my original name. Military records showed Sarah Mitchell from Phoenix. Your birth certificate had been legally changed, and the connection to Emma Thompson wasn't in the databases I had access to. I've been looking for a girl named Emma Thompson, not Sarah Mitchell." The irony was not lost on either of them. They had been on the same base for months, passing each other in the halls, attending the same briefings, and neither had known their true connection. Sarah stood up and began pacing the small space of the medical tent. "This is insane. All those years wondering who my parents were. Making up stories about why they gave me up, and you were out there looking for me the whole time." "Emma," the general started. "It's Sarah now," she interrupted. "I've been Sarah Mitchell for 21 years. I don't even remember being Emma Thompson." General Thompson nodded, understanding that this would be an adjustment for both of them. "Sarah, then, I know this is overwhelming. I know you have no reason to trust me or believe anything I'm saying. But I want you to know that losing you was the greatest regret of my life." She stopped pacing and looked at him directly. "Prove it." "What?" "Prove that you never stopped looking. Prove that you're really my father. Anyone could have a locket with a baby picture." The general reached into his wallet and pulled out a worn envelope. Inside were dozens of photographs, documents, and newspaper clippings. He spread them out on the medical examination table. "These are pictures from every birthday party I threw for you, even though you weren't there. Every year on your birthday, I would get a cake and take a picture of it, hoping that somehow the universe would let you know that someone was thinking of you." Sarah picked up one of the photographs. It showed a small cake with pink frosting and candles, sitting on a kitchen table next to a wrapped present. Written on the back was Emma's 8th birthday. "Daddy loves you." "These presents," she said, pointing to the wrapped gifts in several photos. "What happened to them?" "They're in storage. Every year I bought you something age-appropriate and wrapped it, hoping that someday I would be able to give them to you. There's a storage unit in Colorado Springs with 21 years' worth of Christmas and birthday presents." Doc Peterson watched from his corner as Sarah went through the photographs. There were pictures of school supplies labeled, "For Emma's first day of kindergarten," toys for various ages, and even a prom dress with a note that said, "In case Emma goes to prom, 2019. "You bought me a prom dress?" "I figured every girl should have options for prom. I didn't know what your style was, so I got 3 different ones." Sarah laughed despite herself, a sound somewhere between amusement and tears. "That's either really sweet or really crazy." "Probably both," the general admitted with a small smile. "Grief makes people do unusual things." She continued looking through the papers and found copies of report cards from foster children named Emma Thompson from various Arizona school districts. Some were clearly not her, but he had followed up on every lead. "You investigated all these children?" "Every Emma Thompson in the Arizona foster system for 15 years. Most turned out to be different children, but I had to check each one. I couldn't risk missing you." Among the papers, Sarah found something that made her gasp. It was a copy of a drawing done in crayon, clearly by a child's hand. The drawing showed a stick figure in military uniform with "Daddy" written underneath in shaky letters. "Where did you get this?" "You drew it during one of our supervised visits when you were 3. The social worker let me keep it. You told me that when you grew up you wanted to be a soldier like Daddy." Sarah stared at the drawing, and suddenly a memory surfaced that she had buried for years. She remembered sitting at a table with crayons, drawing pictures while a man in uniform watched her with sad eyes. She had always thought it was a dream or something she had imagined. "I remember this," she whispered. "I remember you watching me draw." For the first time since the conversation began, General Thompson smiled. "You were so proud of that drawing. You insisted on using the green crayon for my uniform, and you drew those yellow stripes on my sleeves to represent my rank, even though you were too young to understand what they meant. You kept it all these years. I kept everything. Every scrap of evidence that you existed, that you were my daughter, that I hadn't imagined having a family." Sarah looked around the medical tent, suddenly feeling overwhelmed by the weight of 23 years of separation and longing. I don't know how to process all of this. This morning I was Private Mitchell, orphaned soldier with no family. Now you're telling me I'm your daughter and you've been looking for me my whole life. We don't have to figure everything out today, the general said gently. This is a lot for both of us. But I want you to know that I understand if you need time to think about this. I understand if you want nothing to do with me. You've built a life as Sarah Mitchell, and I respect that. What happens now? She asked. Do we just pretend this never happened and continue with our military duties? Do I salute you at formation and call you sir, knowing that you're my father? It was a question that neither of them had considered. The military had strict policies about family members serving in the same chain of command, and the situation they found themselves in was unprecedented. Doc Peterson cleared his throat from his corner. If I may suggest, sir, this might be something that needs to be discussed with the base commander and possibly military legal counsel. The situation is unique and will require careful handling. The general nodded. You're right, Doc. But first, Sarah, I need to know what you want. Do you want to pursue this relationship? Do you want to try to rebuild what we lost? Sarah looked at the photographs scattered on the table, at the locket still hanging from his neck, at the genuine hope and fear in his eyes. 21 years in foster care had taught her to be cautious about trusting people who claimed to care about her. But something about this felt different. The evidence was overwhelming, and more importantly, the emotion felt real. I want to try, she said finally. But I need time to process all of this, and we need to figure out how this works within the military structure. Of course, whatever you need. And I want to see that storage unit. General Thompson's face lit up. You want to see your presents? I want to see what my father thought I would like for 21 years of birthdays and Christmases. The word father hung in the air between them the first time Sarah had used it. It felt strange on her tongue, but not wrong. We can go this weekend if you'd like, he offered. I'd like that. Doc Peterson stepped forward. I hate to interrupt, but we should probably discuss the immediate logistics. Sarah, you're scheduled for duty tomorrow. And General, you have that meeting with the Pentagon. The real world was starting to creep back into their emotional bubble. They were still soldiers with duties and responsibilities, regardless of their personal situation. Right, the general said, shifting back into his professional demeanor. Doc, I need you to keep this conversation confidential until we can sort out the proper protocols. Sarah, report to my office tomorrow at 0800. We'll discuss how to handle this situation properly. Yes, sir, Sarah replied automatically, then paused. Should I still call you, sir? For now, yes. In public, I'm still your commanding officer, but in private, he hesitated. In private, you can call me whatever feels right to you. As they prepared to leave the medical tent, Sarah gathered up the photographs and documents. Can I keep these? They belong to you. They always did. Outside the tent, the normal activity of the military base continued. Soldiers went about their duties, unaware that 2 lives had just been fundamentally changed inside the small medical facility. Sarah looked around at the familiar surroundings with new eyes. This base, this life, these people, everything looked the same, but her entire world had shifted. Sarah, the general called as she started to walk away. She turned back to him. Welcome home, daughter. For the first time in her memory, Sarah smiled at being called someone's daughter. 3 months had passed since that life-changing day in the medical tent. Sarah sat in the passenger seat of her father's pickup truck as they drove through the Colorado countryside toward the storage facility. The autumn leaves painted the landscape in brilliant oranges and golds, and for the first time in her adult life, Sarah felt like she was going somewhere that mattered. The transition had not been easy. Military protocol required that Sarah be transferred to a different unit to avoid any conflicts of interest with her father's command. She was now stationed at Fort Carson, about an hour away from her father's base. The paperwork had been a nightmare, requiring multiple meetings with military legal counsel and approval from several levels of command. "Nervous?" General Thompson asked, glancing over at his daughter as they pulled into the storage facility parking lot. "A little," Sarah admitted. "It's strange to think that there's a room full of things meant for me that I've never seen." Over the past 3 months, they had been meeting every weekend, slowly building a relationship that had been interrupted for over 20 years. It was awkward at first, two adults trying to figure out how to be father and daughter when they were essentially strangers. But gradually, they had found their rhythm. Sarah had learned that her father was nothing like the commanding, intimidating general she had first encountered. In private, he was gentle, funny, and surprisingly emotional. He cried when she told him stories about her foster care experiences, and he laughed until his sides hurt when she demonstrated the terrible dance moves she had learned at various military social events. For his part, General Thompson had discovered that his daughter had inherited his stubborn streak and his sense of humor, but had also developed a strength and independence that amazed him. She had survived 21 years without family support and had built herself into an exceptional soldier. They walked through the rows of storage units until they reached number 247. General Thompson pulled out a key that looked like it had been worn smooth from years of handling. "I come here sometimes," he admitted as he unlocked the door. "When I was having a particularly bad day missing you, I would come here and just sit with your things for a while." "That's not weird at all, Dad," Sarah said with a grin. She had started calling him Dad about a month into their reunification, and it still made his heart skip a beat every time. "Hey, we've established that grief makes people do crazy things." He rolled up the metal door, and Sarah gasped. The storage unit was organized like a timeline of childhood. There were shelves labeled with years, and each shelf contained carefully wrapped presents, photo albums, and other mementos. A small chair sat in the corner where her father had obviously spent time over the years. "Dad, this is incredible. I wasn't sure what you would like at different ages, so I tried to cover all the bases." Sarah walked to the shelf labeled Age 5 and picked up a wrapped present. The wrapping paper was faded with age, but it was still carefully taped. "Can I open this?" "They're all yours. Open whatever you want." She carefully unwrapped the present to reveal a complete set of toy soldiers, both male and female figures in different military uniforms. A note was attached that read, "For Emma, every soldier needs backup. Love, Daddy." Sarah laughed. "Toy soldiers? I figured if you were going to follow in the family tradition, you should start with proper training materials." She moved to the shelf labeled Age 8 and found a bicycle helmet and knee pads, along with a note explaining that the actual bicycle had been too big for storage but was at his house waiting for her. The shelf for Age 10 contained books about strong women in history. Age 13 had a collection of board games for when Emma wants to have friends over. "You really thought about everything," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "I tried to imagine what kind of person you were becoming and what you might need at different stages. Sometimes I got it wrong." She looked at the shelf labeled Age 16 and found a collection of romance novels alongside books about automotive repair. "Covering all the bases? I wasn't sure if you'd be into traditional teenage girl interests or if you'd inherited my mechanical aptitude. Turns out it was both, according to your personnel file." Sarah had indeed listed automotive repair as a hobby on her military paperwork. She had learned to fix cars as a teenager, partly out of necessity and partly because she enjoyed working with her hands. As she continued exploring the storage unit, Sarah realized that her father had essentially been parenting a ghost for 21 years. He had tried to anticipate her needs, her interests, her growth as a person, all while having no actual contact with her. It was both heartbreaking and beautiful. "Dad, look at this." She had found a shelf labeled Age 18 that contained graduation gifts, a laptop computer that was now hilariously outdated, a set of luggage for college, and a letter sealed in an envelope marked "For Emma's high school graduation." "Open it," he encouraged. Sarah carefully opened the envelope and pulled out a handwritten letter. Her father's neat military handwriting filled 2 pages. "My dearest Emma, if you are reading this, it means you have graduated from high school, and I am so proud of you. I know I haven't been there to help with homework or attend your school events, but I want you to know that I have been cheering for you every step of the way. As you start this new chapter of your life, I want you to know a few things about your mother and about our family. Your mother, Rebecca, was the smartest person I ever met. She was going to be a doctor, and she would have been amazing at it. You have her eyes and her determination. I hope you also inherited her kindness and her ability to see the good in people. Whatever path you choose in life, know that I support you completely. If you want to go to college, there is money set aside for that. If you want to travel the world, I hope you see beautiful things. If you want to serve your country like your old man, I will be honored to follow in your footsteps. Most importantly, know that not a day has passed that I haven't loved you and missed you. You are the best thing I ever accomplished, and I am sorry I couldn't be the father you deserved. Love always, Dad. P.S. There are more letters in here for different milestones. Open them when you're ready." Sarah was crying openly now, clutching the letter to her chest. "Dad, I did graduate from high school, and I did choose to serve my country. I know, sweetheart, and I am so proud of the woman you've become." She found the other letters he had mentioned. One for her 21st birthday, one labeled, "For when Emma gets married," and one that simply said, "For when Emma has children of her own." "You really never gave up hope that we'd find each other?" "Never. Even in my darkest moments, I believed we would be reunited someday. I just didn't expect it to happen while we were both in uniform." Sarah continued exploring the storage unit and found that the more recent years included increasingly sophisticated gifts. The shelf for age 20 contained a professional camera and photography equipment. Age 21 had a beautiful piece of jewelry, a necklace with the same Celtic knot symbol that was now tattooed on her shoulder. "The necklace," she said, holding it up. "This is what I remembered. It was your mother's. I had replicas made at different sizes, hoping that someday I could give you one that would fit." This was the adult version. Sarah fastened the necklace around her neck and immediately felt a connection to the mother she had never really known. The weight of it felt right, like it belonged there. "Tell me more about her," Sarah said, settling into the chair in the corner of the storage unit. General Thompson sat on the floor beside her, surrounded by 2 decades worth of hope and love. "She was a nurse when I met her, but she was studying to become a doctor. She used to say that she wanted to fix people the way I fixed helicopters." "You worked on helicopters?" "I was a helicopter mechanic before I became an officer. That's actually how I met your mother. I crash-landed at the hospital where she worked. Nothing serious, just a rough landing, but she insisted on checking me for injuries." Sarah smiled. "Was it love at first sight?" "For me, yes. For her, it took a little more convincing. She said military men were too unpredictable. Turns out she was right about that." They spent the next several hours going through the contents of the storage unit. Sarah opened presents from different years, read letters her father had written, and learned about the life he had imagined for her. It was like experiencing all the birthdays and Christmases she had missed, compressed into one emotional afternoon. As the sun began to set, Sarah realized that she felt more complete than she had ever felt in her life. For 21 years, she had carried around a sense that something was missing, that she was fundamentally alone in the world. Now, surrounded by evidence of her father's unwavering love, that feeling was finally gone. "Dad, I have something for you too, she said, pulling a small wrapped package from her purse. Sarah, you didn't need to get me anything. Open it. Inside the package was a photograph in a simple frame. It was a picture of Sarah in her military dress uniform, standing at attention and saluting. At the bottom, she had written, "For Daddy, Emma Thompson Mitchell," following in the family tradition. General Thompson stared at the photograph for a long moment before speaking. You included Thompson in your name. I've been thinking about officially changing it back. Sarah Emma Thompson, what do you think? I think your mother would love that you're keeping both parts of your identity. As they locked up the storage unit and prepared to leave, Sarah looked back at the building that had housed her father's hope for so many years. What happens to all this stuff now? Whatever you want. We can take it to your apartment, put it in my house, or leave it here for when you have kids of your own someday. Kids? Sarah laughed. I'm still figuring out how to be someone's daughter. I think being someone's mother is a long way off. You've got time, and when that day comes, you'll already know how much a parent can love a child, even when they're not there. They drove home in comfortable silence, watching the sun set behind the mountains. Sarah fingered the necklace at her throat and thought about the strange turns life could take. 3 months ago, she was a soldier with no family. Now she was a soldier with a father who had never stopped fighting for her, even when she didn't know he existed. Dad, she said as they pulled into her apartment complex. Yeah. Sweetheart? Thank you for never giving up. Thank you for getting that tattoo. Sarah laughed. You know, when I got that tattoo, I thought I was honoring my past. I had no idea I was actually creating a path to my future. Sometimes the universe works in mysterious ways. As Sarah got out of the truck, she turned back to her father one more time. Same time next weekend? Wouldn't miss it. I have 21 years of weekends to make up for. We've got time, Dad. We've got all the time in the world now. General Thompson watched his daughter walk into her apartment building, the same way he had watched her leave the courthouse 21 years earlier. But this time he knew she would be there next weekend. This time he wasn't saying goodbye. Sarah's tattoo had indeed marked her as his own daughter, just not in the way anyone could have predicted. Sometimes the most important journeys begin with a single step, even when you don't know where you're walking. And sometimes coming home means finding the family that never stopped looking for you.